Lila Turner could not believe her luck that morning. Coffee spilled on her blouse, her phone battery died before she could call her clients, and now her car refused to start in front of the bakery. She sat behind the wheel, turning the key again and again, but the engine only gave a slow cough like it had given up on life. The timing could not have been worse. In less than 2 hours, she needed to be across town to check on the wedding decorations for one of her toughest clients. Lila worked as an event planner, and lately her career felt like one long chase after disasters that were waiting to happen. She sighed and leaned her forehead on the steering wheel. A gust of wind carried the smell of fresh bread and the sound of someone hammering in the distance. Across the street stood a small auto shop. The sign was faded, and the sound of metal tools hitting the floor echoed from inside. Lila straightened, brushed crumbs off her skirt, and decided there was no other choice. She locked her car and hurried across the road, holding her hair back from the wind. Inside the garage, the air smelled of oil and soap. A tall man stood beside an old pickup truck, wiping his hands with a rag. He wore a gray work shirt and dark jeans. His black hair was slightly messed up, and there was a calmness in the way he moved that made Lila stop for a moment. He looked up when she entered, his blue eyes watchful yet kind. "Hi," she said, a little out of breath. "My car will not start. Can you take a look at it? Please tell me you have time." The man smiled, the corners of his mouth lifting quietly. "Sure," he said. "I can take a look." "Which car is it?" She pointed through the open door to her little silver sedan. "The one that looks like it has given up on life." He chuckled, dropped the rag on a table, and walked out with her. In the sunlight, Lila noticed he did not have the rough voice she expected from a mechanic. It was low and steady, but polite. He opened the hood, leaned in, and began checking the engine with practiced ease. Without looking up, he said, "You did not flood the engine, did you?" "I might have," she said. "I do not know much about cars. They just work until they do not." He looked over at her, smiling again. That is usually how they are. He pressed a few buttons, checked the battery, then closed the hood. "I think your starter is tired, but I can fix it in about 30 minutes. Lila exhaled with relief. "Thank you. You are a lifesaver." He shrugged. "It is my job." "I am Ethan, by the way, Lila Turner," she said, shaking his grease-stained hand before realizing her mistake. They both laughed when she wiped her palm on her skirt. While Ethan worked, Lila stood nearby, tapping her foot. Her phone buzzed weakly after a few seconds of charging from the shop socket. She opened her messages and froze. A notification from one of her oldest friends flashed. Guess who confirmed at the wedding? Jake. Can't wait to see how that goes. Lila's stomach turned. Jake was her ex, the last person she wanted to face. They had broken up 2 years earlier when he decided she cared more about her work than about him. Now he was coming to the one event she could not avoid. Her hands started to shake. Ethan noticed. "Bad news. You could say that," she muttered. "I have to see my ex at a wedding on Saturday, and everyone expects me to show up looking happy and successful. I was even supposed to bring a date." Ethan leaned on the hood, eyebrows raised. "And you do not have one?" "No, I have been too busy fixing other people's weddings to think about my own love life." He studied her face as if weighing something. Sounds like a tough situation. An idea flashed through her mind before she could stop it. It sounded crazy, absolutely foolish, yet somehow it made sense in her panic. She looked at him, at his calm eyes and simple sweatshirt, and blurted, "Could you pretend to be my boyfriend, just for that one day?" Ethan blinked, setting down his wrench. "You want me to what?" "I know it sounds insane, but I need to show Jake that I am fine, that I have moved on." She spoke quickly, words tumbling out. "I will pay you for your time, of course. It will just be one day. We'll eat great food, dance a little, then vanish back to your normal life." Ethan wiped his hands again, his smile widening slightly. "You are serious?" "Completely." There was a pause that stretched just long enough to make Lila think he would refuse. Then, to her surprise, he gave a small nod. "All right, one day. One day I will play along." Lila blinked, stunned. "You will? Why not?" "It sounds more interesting than changing brake pads." Relief and disbelief washed over her. She laughed, feeling lighter for the first time that morning. "Thank you, Ethan. You have no idea what this means to me." He looked at her for a moment, a thoughtful look in his eyes that she did not understand. "We will see," he said softly. Then he bent down again to tighten the last screw on her car, a faint smile still on his face. Ethan Cole stood in the workshop long after Lila had driven away. The sound of her little silver car faded down the road, but her voice stayed in his mind. He smiled to himself, shaking his head. He had just agreed to pretend to be someone's boyfriend at a wedding. It was not something a man like him usually did. Most people would have thought twice before saying yes, but there was something about Lila's energy that made it impossible to refuse. He put away his tools, walked into the small office at the back of the garage, and picked up his phone. There were several missed calls from his assistant and a long list of unread messages. The name on top of the screen glared at him. It was a reminder of his real life, the life Lila had no idea existed. Ethan was not a full-time mechanic. He owned Cole Motors, one of the biggest automotive companies in the state. The small workshop where he liked to spend his afternoons was part of his wider network, but he often came there disguised as a regular worker. To most of his staff, he was just Ethan, the quiet man who liked the smell of oil and the hum of engines. He found peace among the tools, away from meetings, cameras, and fake smiles. He tapped open a message from his assistant, Nora. "Board meeting at 10. Investors want to discuss expansion plan." Ethan sighed. He typed back, "Handle the meeting. I will join later." He placed the phone down and walked toward the open doors of the garage. The sunlight felt good on his face, and for the first time in a while, he looked forward to something other than work. As he thought about Lila, a warm amusement filled him. She had treated him like an ordinary person, not like a man whose name appeared in magazines or whose company logo flashed on billboards. She had spoken fast, her words tripping over each other, her eyes wide and bright. It had been refreshing. He remembered the way she had asked him, without hesitation or calculation, to pretend to be her boyfriend. It had been such a ridiculous request, yet charming in its honesty. He had known many people who smiled politely to get close to him for his name, his company, or his fortune. Lila's desperate request had been different. It had been real, awkward, even funny. That was why he had said yes. Later that evening, Ethan's driver pulled up in front of his glass-walled office building. He changed out of his work shirt, cleaned the smudges of grease from his hands, and put on a neat black jacket. As he walked through the office lobby, several employees greeted him with practiced smiles. He nodded in return, but kept walking. Inside the boardroom, a group of managers stood waiting. Documents were spread across the table, and the screens on the wall displayed graphs and figures. Ethan listened to their discussions about production rates and marketing strategies, but his mind kept drifting back to the garage. He wondered what Lila was doing at that moment. Was she regretting her strange request? Did she tell her friends she had found someone willing to play along? The thought made him chuckle quietly, which earned puzzled looks from two senior managers. When the meeting ended, Ethan stayed behind for a moment. He looked through the large windows at the city below. All the glass towers and busy roads felt cold compared to the smell of gasoline and the sound of metal tools clanging in the workshop. For the first time in years, he realized he missed being treated like a regular person. That evening, he drove his own car instead of letting his driver take the wheel. The smooth hum of the engine calmed his thoughts. As the city lights blurred past, he replayed the moment she had met him. The way she had spoken, with a mix of panic and boldness, had amused him deeply. He could still see the determination in her face when she said she only needed him for one day. Yet he had a strange feeling that one day might not be enough. Back at his apartment, Ethan sat on the edge of his couch, thinking about what would happen next. If Lila discovered who he really was, she would probably be angry. He did not like hiding the truth, but something inside told him that if he told her now, the fragile, honest connection between them would break before it even began. She had liked him for who he seemed to be, not for what he owned. That was rare enough to protect for a little while. He opened his laptop and glanced at his calendar. Her friend's wedding was 3 days away. A small smile shaped his lips as he imagined showing up by her side, pretending to be the man she needed. He could already picture her expression, the mix of relief and disbelief. As night covered the city, Ethan leaned back and stared at the ceiling. He did not know why he cared so much, but he did. He'd be pretending to be someone's partner, even just for a day. Might remind him of the parts of himself that success had buried. Maybe this was a small escape, An odd adventure, something real hidden inside all the pretending. He closed his eyes, still smiling faintly, and decided he would keep his secret for now. The world could see him as the CEO of Cole Motors, but Lila would meet only Ethan, the quiet man with grease on his hands. The thought made him feel freer than he had in years. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and warm. Lila Turner stood in front of her mirror and stared at her reflection. Her hair was done neatly, her blue dress fit just right, but her hands kept trembling. She had planned hundreds of weddings for other people, but had never been this nervous about any of them. This time, she was not just working. She was pretending. Ethan had promised to meet her at the venue. He had sounded calm over the phone while she had tried not to sound like she was about to faint. Every time she thought about what she had asked him to do, she questioned her own sanity. How could she have asked a complete stranger to play her boyfriend in front of all her friends? Still, there was no way to back out now. Her ex would be there, and she could not face him alone. When she arrived at the hotel ballroom, the wedding decorations were already perfect. White flowers lined every table, and soft golden lights filled the room. Lila smiled politely at the other guests, pretending she was relaxed. Inside, her heart raced. Then, just as she turned toward the entrance, she saw him walk in. Ethan looked very different from the man she had met at the garage. He wore a dark suit that fit perfectly, and his hair was brushed back neatly. There was no trace of grease or dust anywhere. For a moment, Lila forgot to breathe. He looked so confident, so natural, as if he belonged there. When he spotted her across the room, he smiled in that calm way of his that somehow made her shoulders drop in relief. "You look beautiful," he said softly as he reached her side. His voice was smooth and steady, just the way she remembered it. Lila laughed nervously. "You clean up pretty well yourself. Hardly recognize my mechanic," he grinned. "Let us keep it that way today." Before she could reply, one of her friends spotted them. "Lila," the woman called out, rushing over with wide eyes. "Oh my goodness, who is this?" Lila hesitated for only half a second before answering, "This is Ethan, my boyfriend." The words made her cheeks flush. She expected Ethan to look awkward, but he simply smiled, slipped his hand lightly around her waist, and greeted her friend with perfect ease. His tone was relaxed, his smile genuine, and Lila almost forgot they were pretending. Her friend seemed impressed. The rest of the event passed in a blur of music, clinking glasses, and lively chatter. Ethan stayed close, introducing himself when needed, always polite and charming. Lila watched him handle every person with such calm confidence that she started to wonder what his life was really like. He did not act like any mechanic she had ever met. He moved with quiet grace, like someone used to being in control. Still, every time their eyes met, there was kindness there. Not the sharp pride she had often seen in men trying to impress her. Then, as she was talking with another guest, she felt her stomach tighten. Across the room, Jake arrived. He looked the same as always, tall and confident, but his eyes widened when he saw Lila standing beside Ethan. He walked over slowly, wearing a smooth smile that Lila no longer trusted. "Lila," Jake greeted, his tone half surprised, half uncertain. "It has been a while." "It has," she said calmly, though her pulse jumped. "This is Ethan, my boyfriend." Ethan extended his hand. "Nice to meet you." Jake shook it reluctantly, his confidence flickering. "So how did you two meet?" Before Lila could trip over her explanation, Ethan answered icily, "Her car broke down. I offered to help. She offered me coffee in return. The rest just happened naturally." Jake raised his eyebrows. "That was quick." "It does not always take long when something feels right," Ethan said with a light smile. Jake forced a grin and turned away to greet someone else, but not before Lila caught the faint annoyance in his expression. When Jake was out of earshot, Lila turned to Ethan in shock and whispered, "That was impressive." He looked amused. "I fix engines and improvise stories. Sometimes both at the same time." She laughed, feeling her tension fade a little. For the rest of the evening, everything felt strangely easy. They danced once, not too close, not too far, and people around them smiled as if they truly belonged together. When the music slowed, Ethan guided her with steady confidence, his hand resting lightly against her back. She could smell the clean scent of his cologne, mixed with a hint of motor oil that still lingered faintly, a reminder of where this all began. As the night went on, they shared quiet jokes, small smiles, and quick glances that made Lila's heart skip in ways she did not want to admit. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel like she had to impress anyone. He made her laugh without even trying, and she caught herself forgetting the whole reason she had brought him there. When the couple finally cut the cake and the last guests were leaving, Lila and Ethan stepped outside into the cool night air. The streetlights cast a soft glow over them. Lila folded her arms, her voice softer now. "I cannot thank you enough. You saved me tonight." Ethan looked at her for a moment, expression unreadable. "You did not need saving. You just needed a reminder that you are stronger than you think." Lila smiled, unsure of what to say. As they stood there, a quiet stillness settled between them, warm and strange. Neither of them spoke for a while, but both seemed to understand something had changed. The pretending might be over for now, but the feeling that lingered was very real. The next morning, Lila woke up with a smile. She had survived the wedding without any disaster, and somehow it had turned into one of the best nights she had in a long time. Her friends had all been kind. Jake had looked uncomfortable the whole evening, and Ethan had been perfect. He had played the part better than she could have dreamed. She got out of bed humming softly, still thinking about the way he had made everyone feel like what they had was real. But as the sunlight streamed through her window, doubt crept in. She knew very little about him. She only knew that he worked as a mechanic and that he had kind eyes. Beyond that, there was nothing. She wondered if he even wanted to talk to her again now that his part in her little play was finished. Ethan, on the other hand, had woken early in his large apartment overlooking the city. He had an important meeting that morning, but his thoughts kept returning to the previous night. He had promised himself that it was only an act, yet the memory of Lila's laughter and the soft glow of the lights stayed with him. He could still see the surprise in her eyes when he had complimented her, the way her face had relaxed when she realized he would not let her face her ex alone. He reached for his phone, meaning to send her a short message, then stopped. He knew the moment he did, the line between pretending and something real would start to blur even more. But the thought of not hearing from her made his chest ache in a strange way. At his office, meetings dragged on. A large screen in the corner showed a live business broadcast discussing coal motors. The anchor mentioned expansions, profits, and the company's name, alongside Ethan's own face. The employees in the room nodded seriously as they took notes, but Ethan barely heard them. Then something on the screen caught his attention. The same broadcast was also playing on a television in the hotel lobby where the wedding was still being cleaned up. While Ethan tried to focus on the numbers, Lila was at the same hotel speaking with the staff about leftover decorations. She was giving instructions when the television near the front desk flashed with the headline, "Ethan Cole announces new branch." She turned her head absently and blinked. The man standing behind a row of microphones on the screen looked exactly like Ethan, only he was in a suit and surrounded by flashing cameras. Her first thought was that it could not be him. Then she heard the reporter's voice mention his name again clearly. Ethan Cole, the CEO of Cole Motors. Lila froze. It's the memory of him in the garage, his easy smile, his quiet words all tumbled through her mind. He had told her nothing. She had asked him about his job, and he had led her believe he was just a regular mechanic. The truth hit her so hard that she almost laughed, but it was not the kind of laugh that came from humor. It was sharp and bitter. She barely remembered finishing her work or walking outside. Her phone buzzed in her hand. It was a message from Ethan. "Can we talk?" it said. Lila stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back one word. Ethan read her reply while standing in his office. His stomach sank. He guessed what had happened even before he turned on the muted television behind him. His face stared back at him from the screen, smiling for reporters. He ran a hand through his hair, wishing he had told her sooner. He called her, but she did not answer. Texted again, but there was no reply. Lila spent the rest of her evening pacing across her apartment. Her mind was a storm of questions. Why had he pretended? Was it just a game for him? She had trusted him enough to bring him into her world, and all the while he had been hiding his real one? She wanted to hate him, yet disappointment hurt more than anger. When night fell, she sat on her couch staring out at the quiet street below. She remembered how real his eyes had looked when he told her she was stronger than she thought. For a moment, she wished he had at least told her that truth instead of letting her find out from a television screen. Across the city, Ethan stood alone in his apartment, his phone cold in his hand. The silence between them felt heavier than any business deal he had ever faced. He wished he could explain that he had not lied because of pride. He had wanted to see her look at him the way she had in that garage, not for his company, not for his title, just for him. But he knew it would sound weak now. She had every right to be upset. Lila placed her phone on the table and turned off the lights. The small apartment felt larger than ever, quiet except for her heartbeat. She knew she had invited him into this mess, and maybe she should have expected that someone as mysterious as Ethan would come with secrets. Still, she could not stop feeling foolish. That night, two people lay awake in different rooms of the same city. One searched for words that might fix what was broken. The other tried to forget the way it had felt when pretending started to feel too real. Days passed, but the silence between Lila and Ethan stayed. Lila tried to bury herself in work. She filled her schedule with meetings, client calls, and endless checklists. On the outside, she seemed composed and busy as usual, but inside she was restless. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped it might be him. Yet every time she looked, her heart dropped again. Ethan's name never appeared after that last message. She told herself it was fine. She had no reason to feel this upset. It had all been pretend. Just an act, a favor, nothing more. But she could not erase the memory of how real it had felt when he held her hand under the wedding lights, or the gentle way he had looked at her when she started to panic. Those moments replayed in her mind without mercy. One afternoon, as she was fixing a mess from a client's event order, her friend Nora stopped by her office. Nora noticed the strained look on Leela's face and asked, "Are you all right? You have been acting different since the wedding?" Leela gave a weak laugh. "I am fine. Just busy." "That mechanic of yours looked like more than a prop," Nora said with a teasing smile. "What happened to him?" Lila forced a smile, then shook her head. "He was not who I thought he was." Nora looked surprised. "What do you mean?" Lila hesitated before answering. "He is not just a mechanic. He is the CEO of Cole Motors." Her friend's mouth dropped open. "You are joking." "I wish I was," Lila replied quietly. "He let me believe he was just a guy who worked in a garage. I made a fool of myself." "But maybe he had a reason," Nora said gently. Lila sighed. "Maybe, but he should have trusted me enough to tell me. Instead, I found out on a television screen. It made everything feel fake." Nora reached for her hand. "Sometimes people hide because they are afraid of being judged. Maybe he wanted you to like him for who he was, not for what he had." Lila did not respond. Deep down, she knew that could be true, but it did not stop the sting. She had trusted him without hesitation, and now that trust felt broken. Meanwhile, Ethan's world carried on with its usual steady rhythm, but his mind was elsewhere. Every board meeting felt dull. Every handshake reminded him of how false people could be. Lila's voice haunted him in quiet moments, especially her laughter and the fierce honesty in her eyes. He had tried calling again, but she had blocked his number. It hurt more than he liked to admit. One night he sat alone on his balcony watching the city lights below. He thought about how pretenses had become part of his daily life. When he was in the office, people only saw his success. When he was in the garage, Lila had seen a different side of him, the one that actually felt real. He realized he missed being that man more than he missed being the admired CEO. The next morning, decided to drive by her office, even if he had to risk her anger. I parked a short distance away and watched people come and go. Then he saw her through the front glass, pacing between her desk and the window. She looked tired but still graceful, her determination still bright even through her frustration. He wanted to walk in, but fear held him back. The last thing he wanted was to push her further away. Inside, Lila somehow felt his presence. She turned toward the window without knowing why, and caught sight of a familiar car. Her breath caught. Ethan was there. For a split second, she considered going outside to tell him exactly what she felt, but pride stopped her feet. Instead, she turned back to her desk, pretending she had not seen him. Ethan waited for a few minutes longer, hoping she might come out. When she did not, he lowered his head, started his car, and drove away. That evening, Lila went home feeling heavier. She poured herself some tea and sank onto her couch. The quiet apartment felt even more silent than usual. She thought about what she would say to him if she ever saw him again. Part of her wanted to yell. Another part wanted to ask why he had agreed to her ridiculous plan in the first place. But most of all, she just wanted answers. Across the city, Ethan sat at his desk reading reports that no longer interested him. He had told himself he would give her space, but he knew he could not let it end like this. She deserved an explanation, and he had to find a way to give it. He decided that no matter what it took, he would wait for the right moment to tell her everything. Not as a businessman or a stranger pretending to be someone else, but as the man who had fallen for her without even trying. Lila, lying awake in her bed, did not know that he was thinking the same thing. She stared at the ceiling, wondering if there would ever be a day when she could look at him again without remembering the lie. Both of them drifted to sleep that night, lost in the same thought they would never admit aloud, wishing their pretending had not come with such a high cost.